Hi, folks. I want to talk to you tonight about the Methodists and their impact in the United States. The Methodists get their beginnings, obviously, with John Wesley, who was actually an Anglican priest, and after his death, the Methodists are formed. Wesley, there was an interesting meeting in Baltimore in 1784 where about 60 Methodist preachers gathered. They did not have, they were not ordained in the United States, which means they couldn't marry, give communion, or do weddings for other folks. So Wesley actually sent a handful of these preachers over there, and some of them got ordained. And Asbury eventually is going to be appointed bishop there in the United States. One of those men appointed and ordained was James O'Kelly, who was for 8 years he was a presiding elder. He actually broke off to start what we call the Restoration Movement, leading to the Stone Campbell movement, the heritage that I actually come from. There was a book review called The Methodist Experience in America by Gillespie, and she talks about there were 24 denominational affiliates by the Methodists. What an influence. This book traces the Methodists from the very beginnings of the church classes, they called them, where folks were circulating preachers instead of having a stationary preacher, all the way to modern times, including Methodists like Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey, breaking the color barrier. And I remember one of Branch Rickey's comments that God was a Methodist. Well, in this book, they talk about itinerant preachers also for Methodists that were very influential in the frontier life, especially. They were well suited for that. These itinerant preachers, and this is from another article from the historian by Tilley, and he talked about some of these before the Methodist circuit riders. A lot of the preachers were commonly ignorant, as he said. Their sermons weren't constructed very well before the Methodist itinerant preachers. English was ignored. Rhetoric was not used much. I have an excerpt here from one of the sermons that they preached, and I found that sermon was interesting. Now, my brethren, as I have told you, I am an uneducated man and know nothing about grammar, talk, and college highfalutin, but I am a plain, Plane, unlearnt preacher of the gospel. What's been foreordained and called to prepare. I think you get the idea. Before the Methodists and their push for education, some of the preaching out on the frontier, quite uneducated Methodists will change that for sure. One of the itinerant preachers that I focus on in my research paper is Peter Cartwright, who came from Virginia and settled in Illinois and about 5 years after we became a state in 1818. And he's going to be a very key person in pushing for a lot of changes, a lot of things that happen here in Illinois. Education was key for a lot of the Methodists. Cartwright shows this. Harry Pratt, in his article, talks about the many schools that this Methodist itinerant preacher Cartwright helped found in Illinois. There are a lot of examples of educational institutions in many other parts. In our book that we read on page 230, Noel says that by the Civil War, Methodists, along with the Baptists, staffed about half of the higher education institutions. So this is a nationwide influence that the Methodists were seen in terms of education. We also see there are quite a bit of divisions, and we talk about all these denominations that are in Methodism, but there's a lot more that broke off. And a lot of these splits took place about 10 years before the Civil War. They split along the lines of North and South over this issue of slavery. The Methodist churches rejoined in 1939. So you have quite a gap there before they settled some differences, and that's a different story. After the Civil War, we see that the African Americans separated and formed different, like the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, which become Lane College, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which started the Morris Brown College, and the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, which started Livingstone College. So a lot of influence into these areas too from the Methodists. The Nazarene Church also will be a later split from into the holiness part of the Methodists. Nazarenes will make up a large percentage of the United States. So they impacted not only my state, but they impacted, with 4 denominational affiliates, lots of folks were impacted by the Methodists. Thank you.